Legal acquisition findings, decision 19.131, and I will call upon the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. First, the document summarizes the progress in work carried out by the Secretariat on digital solutions and capacity building activities on legal acquisition findings, LAFs. Then, as requested by the Standing Committee, the document also provides the draft guidance on the chain of custody required for demonstrating the legal acquisition of parental or breeding stock. Finally, the document presents a new set of decisions on LAF and draft amendments to Annexes 1 and 3 to Resolution 18.7 to update the Rapid Guide. The Standing Committee is invited to encourage parties to implement Resolution 18.7 and use the Rapid Guide, review and submit the draft decisions and amendments to Annexes 1 and 3 to Resolution 18.7 to COP20, consider the suggested draft guidance and request the Secretariat to make it available after any amendments on the CITES website, and agree that decisions 19.128 to 19.131 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the recommendations are again in paragraph 22. Little a and b seem pretty straightforward, noting and encouraging parties. Where I'm looking for discussion is on recommendation C, D, E. So I will open the floor to Standing Committee members. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The EU and its member states support the recommendations in paragraph 22 of the document under letters A, B, and F. In relation to recommendations C, D, and E, we have some proposals for amendments aimed at strengthening their consistency with the Convention and the relevant resolutions, which we have detailed in the information document number 30. In particular, with regard to the guidance on the chain of custody required for demonstrating the legal acquisition of the parental/breeding stock, we welcome the information provided by the two guidance documents on the legal acquisition of parental stocks and breeding stocks and on the pre-convention or pre-accession cases. With regard to the first guidance, our proposed amendments aim to ensure a consistent use of the word parental in accordance with the definition provided in Resolution Conf 11.11, limiting its use to plants and preventing its use in contexts not provided or defined by the relevant resolutions. We also want to ensure the consistent use of the word breeding in accordance with the definition set out in Resolution Conf 10.16, again preventing its application to concepts not provided or defined by the relevant resolutions. Thirdly, we want to eliminate references to definitions or concepts not provided or defined in the relevant resolutions by removing the words original parental/breeding stock to prevent misinterpretations. We also want to clarify that removal from the wild is not the only possible source of a specimen, as specimens may also be artificially propagated or bred in captivity, in order to prevent unfounded legal implications that are not based on the provisions, definitions and concepts set out in the Convention and its resolutions. With regard to the second guidance, the amendments aim at ensuring the consistent use of the word parental as defined in ResConf 11.11 and of the word breeding as defined in Resolution Conf 10.16. With regard to recommendations on the letters C and D, we propose some amendments aimed at improving the text contained in Annexes 1 and 2 of the document. We feel that legal acquisition findings are a fundamental element in the CITES procedures, and for this reason, we believe that the guidance documents should be as close as possible to the Convention and the relevant resolutions to help parties and the private sector to apply the Convention in the best possible way. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the reference to the information document. I was supposed to say that and forgot, so thank you. I look for other standing committee members. I open the floor to observer parties. Oh, I have the UK, and then I have Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. On the rapid guide on legal acquisition findings, we're pleased that there's an increasing amount of guidance material available to parties to support the implementation of LAFs. And we've been testing the rapid guide in the UK and can provide feedback to the Secretariat in due course. On the draft guidance in Annex 3 on the chain of custody, we welcome the draft guidance prepared by the Secretariat and support steps to achieve a common understanding by parties when it comes to implementing the exemptions for captive bred and artificially propagated specimens. This guidance appears also to be relevant to the discussions under item 62, which addresses challenges in the application of the Convention for Trade in Non-Wild Specimens of both CITES listed plants and animals, and suggests that this guidance is also reviewed by the workshop proposed in the draft decisions under this item, if that's agreed when we get to it. We note and support the suggestions from the EU and Canada in their information document and can support these drafting suggestions. Given it is quite substantive guidance, we would recommend that this guide is also presented to COP20 for its consideration, and we have some suggestions to recommendation E to reflect that, if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Switzerland would like to thank the EU and its member states, and also Canada, for handing in these draft amendments to SC 78, Doc 47, in Inf Doc 30. And we support these changes to the document. We believe that the proposed changes ensure consistency with existing resolutions and make some of the steps that parties must take in order to make legal acquisition findings clearer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have the DRC.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam. We are speaking as representatives of Central Africa. With respect to paragraph 22, parties need methodological tools with respect to LAFs. We therefore think that we should ensure that there's a dynamic process that will ensure that we have good guidance with respect to LAFs. And we would also like to say that we support the idea of the next standing committee to consider the guidance so that we're in a position to have the opportunity to prepare proposals for COP20. Thank you.
I now open the floor to observer parties. I have Brazil.
Thank you very much. This is under national capacity. Brazil fully supports the text in the draft guidance on the chain of custody requirement for demonstrating the legal acquisition of parental breeding stock. For us, it's fundamental to establish criteria for evaluating the chain of custody by tracing listed species from their removal from the wild, the subsequent ownership of these specimens to the arrival in the facility where they are used as part of parental and breeding stock, particularly when it comes to conservation of endangered species, as in the case of Spix macaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have the USA, followed by New Zealand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States supports the recommendations in the document A, B, and D, as well as the recommendations C, D, and E, as amended by the European Union. However, we have a few edits to their They're proposed edits that were in the information doc, and I don't know if you want them now. They are sort of repeating edits, so let me know when you're ready.
Let's hold off on those edits, but I'm getting a sense that we will need some work on those. I call on Oceania, New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo the intervention we had from Brazil about the importance of the chain of custody in determining legal acquisition of parental stock. But I guess we differ from what we've heard from many parties here, is that we find that parties often interpret parental stock or breeding stock as being sort of the generation before the current ones. And so we do sort of agree with the term used in Annex 3 of referring to that as the original parental breeding stock. But actually our preference would be to refer to the generation taken from the wild as the original founding stock. And further recommend that that term original founding stock is used consistently in resolutions 9.19, 10.16, 11.11 and 12.10 to refer to those animals or plants taken from the wild and later used for captive breeding or artificial propagation. So we would prefer to see a term used which is less ambiguous than the current parental breeding stock and used throughout those 4 resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you. I now will turn to observer parties. I have Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada also submitted the INFDOC along with the EU, and so I won't repeat the rationale that was provided by Belgium. Canada would like to see some of those amendments for clarity, and in particular, we are reminded that what we're talking about is providing guidance on making legal acquisition findings, and so we turn to the text of the Convention. And for example, in Article 3, a management authority of the state of export is satisfied that the specimen was not obtained in contravention of the laws of that state for the protection of fauna and flora, and so we think it's important that the legal acquisition finding guidance speak to the expectations under the Convention, and that is the basis for some of the amendments that Canada proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on the Central African Republic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Central African Republic is one of the countries of Central Africa supporting the statement made by the representative for our region. Thank you, Madam.
I call on the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. We welcome the document and we welcome the recommendations. I'm taking the floor to draw everyone's attention to the fact that there might be an overlap of the scheme or the matrix proposed under this document and another matrix which is contained in the guidelines for the application of CITES source codes. And namely, it refers to the fact that based on the current document at hand, if the management authority is not satisfied that the specimens have been acquired legally, then the permit is not to be issued. However, in line with the guidelines for the application of CITES source codes, there is a different procedure if the answer to the question whether there is sufficient information about the specimen to determine its source is no, then there is the source code U, which means that the permit can be issued. So in this regard, if there is a clarification to be made, or whether this is something that we should consider for the future work or revision to avoid this contradiction, that then this might be helpful. If there is any clarification to be provided now, that will also be appreciated for our understanding. Thanks.
Thank you. I have another party, Gabon, and I think then I will move to observer organizations and consult with the Secretariat. I'm getting a sense in the room. Call on Gabon.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like the other representative of our sub-region, we would like to say that we support the recommendations in paragraph 22, as well as the proposal with respect to the chain of custody. This would allow members and observers to understand the situation and prepare submissions for COP20. Thank you.
Thank you. I now turn to observer organizations, and I'll take one or two here. I have FAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. FAO would like to thank the Secretariat for the continued partnership in implementing Decision 19.130 in conjunction with Decision 19.62 on national laws for the implementation of the Convention, and for the Secretariat's support in the official launch of CITES LEX in March last year. We thank the parties that have sent their responses to notification 2024/053, based on which we were able to refine the database. We continue to work on enhancing CITES LEX, specifically in ensuring the lists of instruments under the country profiles are as close as possible to what party sees as relevant and related to the CITES regime, with a view to making the database most useful to the parties. The homepage will be updated with the inclusion of 2 videos introducing CITES LEX and how to use it, the link to the CITES LEX pamphlets, which are already published and available online in all UN working languages. We take this opportunity to encourage again all parties to visit the CITES LEX website and continue to provide feedback on their CITES LEX profiles. We look forward to the development of the second phase of CITES LEX, and will continue working with the Secretariat, including to explore the possibility of holding of an international working shop on legal acquisition findings, following up on the one held in Oxford in 2022, with a view to jointly conceptualizing and agreeing on the activities and process for the second phase. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further requests, so I will consult with the Secretariat on a way forward. All right, based on the discussion, I think we have, I'm looking for the Standing Committee to see if this is the way forward. I think we agree to little paragraph 8 to note the work conducted by the Secretariat. I think we agree to B, encouraging parties to implement Resolution Conf 18.7, Rev Cop 19, and the use of the rapid guide for making legal acquisition findings when preparing their LEFs. I think we had agreement on little d, No, we didn't have agreement on D, sorry. We had agreement on, A, B, and F, sorry. Which agrees that the decisions have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. Where we need work is on D and E, and I suggest the way forward would be that basically parties who have suggested amendments would basically provide them to the Secretariat, and they will prepare a COM document which will come back to us for discussion and consideration. So I'm looking to the Standing Committee if I've characterized this correctly, and this would be a way forward. So D and E are still outstanding and would come back to us as a COM document based on the amendments provided that we heard in the discussion. And we agree to A, B, and F. So. Yeah. So we will do the COM document on little paragraph D and E, which will result in us looking at C again. So we've only accepted A, B, and F, and we will come back to D, E, and C of the recommendations. Do I have Standing Committee agreement on that? And I would also ask, Oceania had comments but not amendments, but they may want to also pass them to the Secretariat for consideration. Okay, then I will conclude this for now, and we table part of it. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is 35.1, implementation of Resolution Comp 17.7, Rev Cop 19, document 35.1 on the review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity. And I call on the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for just getting settled here. So this document reports on the implementation of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev Cop 19, and it is structured in two sections. Section 1 provides an update on the progress on the implementation of this resolution since the last overview of cases subject to review was presented at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee. Details of the 44 cases of species country combinations that have been selected for review during the two iterations to date are presented in two tables in Annex 1, arranged alphabetically by taxon. And a table of the 14 current ongoing cases, arranged alphabetically by party, is presented in Annex 2 to this document. Then Section 2 of the document reports on actions taken by parties to implement recommendations made by the Animals Committee and the Standing Committee. Annex 3 contains summaries of the responses received from the parties concerned. Where these were short responses, they are presented in full in the tables in Annex 3, while more detailed responses are presented in Annex 5 in the language and format received. Concerning these cases, the Secretariat consulted with the members of the Animals Committee through its chair. The Secretariat took into account their views in its assessment and recommendations, while details of the views of the Animals Committee are presented in Annex 4. Concerning Macaca fascicularis from Cambodia, in paragraph 19, it is indicated that the United States of America reached out to the Secretariat and the chair of the Animals Committee and shared information on investigations conducted by authorities in the United States of America concerning Macaca fascicularis exported from Cambodia. And this was also referred to in paragraphs 10 to 11 of document SC 78 Doc 38.1 on enforcement matters. and is included an analysis of the possible production rates from the captive breeding facilities based on information it had previously obtained from Cambodia. This information was made available to the members of the Animals Committee for consideration in their deliberations and also to Cambodia. Concerning Macaca fascicularis from Vietnam, the Secretariat would like to draw the Committee's attention to document 33.10, which reports on the Secretariat's recent mission to Vietnam under Article 13 of the Convention, which you discussed earlier today. So following publication of this document, the Secretariat reached out to the parties concerned, inviting them to submit any additional information in response to the Secretariat's assessment and recommendations, as well as the views and concerns of the Animals Committee members. As a result, the Secretariat has received several additional pieces of information, including from Nicaragua concerning Agalichnus calidrius, Dendrobatus auratus, and Ufago pumilio, which you can find in Information Doc 29. From Kazakhstan concerning Chlamydosis mcqueenii, which can be found in Information Doc 22. From Cambodia, Philippines, and Vietnam concerning Macaca fascicularis, and the Vietnam response is in Information Doc 14. From Jordan concerning Testudo graeca, Uzbekistan concerning Testudo horsfieldii, which is in Information Document 34, and from Egypt concerning Testudo kleinmanii, which is Information Doc 31. The Secretariat is in the process of making this additional information available as information documents, so those that are not already as information documents will be made available. So the Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations as set out in paragraph 25. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I open any discussion, I would like to give the floor to the Animals Committee Chair to outline the process from here.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to explain how we will pursue with all this information that has been made available. I would like to remind everyone that paragraph 2.0 of Resolution Conf 17.7 Ref COP 19 on the stage 4 measures to be taken regarding the implementation of recommendations states that the Secretariat shall monitor progress against the recommendations, taking account of the different deadlines and following timely intersessional consultation with the members of the Animals Committee through its chair, followed by the members of the Standing Committee through its chair, determine whether the recommendations referred to above have been implemented. So in this regard, I would like to appreciate and acknowledge those parties that have already provided additional information to the Secretariat for consideration by the Animals Committee. The intersessional consultation with the members of the Animals Committee to review all of this new information will be initiated shortly after this meeting, with a view to reporting on these cases at the 79th meeting of the Standing Committee prior to COP 20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the explanation of where we are in the process. So I would like to invite the standing, I propose, this is how I plan to go through this document, which has a number of cases. I propose to go through each subparagraph in paragraph 25, one by one. I will pause on each item to see if there are any comments, mindful of where we are in the process as outlined by the chair of the Animals Committee. The first item is subparagraph A, which invites the committee to note the status of implementation of the cases selected for the 2 iterations of the review under Resolution 17.7 and the list of 14 ongoing cases provided in Annex 1 and 2. So I open the floor to the members of the Standing Committee. Not seeing any requests, I open it to observer parties. And then I open it to observer organizations. Not seeing any, oh, I have Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At 32nd meeting of Animal Committee, Kazakhstan and Chlamydotis McQueenie.
Excuse me, Kazakhstan, we're not on that particular recommendation yet, and so I will come back to you when we hit that species.
Okay, thank you.
All right, having heard no discussion on this one, I look to the Standing Committee. I would conclude that the Standing Committee notes the status of the implementation of the cases selected for the 2 iterations of the review under Resolution 17.7 Rev Cop 19 and the list of 14 ongoing cases provided in Annexes 1 and 2. Seeing nodding heads, so we'll move on to the next one. And my apologies again on scientific names, I ask your patience. Little b, concerning Centrochelius colata from Benin, Mali, and Togo. We urge Benin, Mali, and Togo to provide a response to the Secretariat by the 31st of July, 2025, so that the matter could be considered at SC 79, noting that the failure to provide a response may potentially result in a recommendation to suspend trade in this species at SC 79. So I open the floor to Standing Committee members for discussion. I open the floor to observer parties. I open the floor to observer organizations. Not hearing any discussion, I can conclude for the Standing Committee concerning Centrochelius sulcata from Benin, Mali, and Togo. The Standing Committee urges Benin, Mali, and Togo to provide a response to the Secretariat by the 31st of July, 2025, so that the matter can be considered at SC 79, noting that failure to provide a response may potentially result in a recommendation to suspend trade in this species at SC 79. Do I have concurrence from the Standing Committee on this? Seeing the nodding heads, all right. Now we move on to the other cases that everyone probably wants to speak to. So, in concerning the cases in subparagraph C to L, I will again open the floor to comments, having noted that these parties have already provided additional information, and we thank them for that, and recalling the comments from the chair of the Animals Committee on the next steps in the process. So, little paragraph C essentially involves concerning Aglachinchinensis caladraris from Nicaragua, that we would retain that species in the review until it provides, and there's A and B and all the recommendations. So I open the discussion on this species from Nicaragua. I call on Poland.
Thank you, Chair. We note and acknowledge that additional information has just been shared as information document by Nicaragua. However, we feel there was not enough time to adequately assess the information against compliance with the recommendations by the Animals Committee on the spot, and there was no possibility to seek views from the Animals Committee on this new information. We therefore propose that the new information will be assessed by the Animals Committee intersessionally, as just pointed out by the Animals Committee Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's exactly what's being proposed, and we will follow the process with the Animals Committee. So on this one, if the Secretariat will modify this information that these recommendations that they have received the information, and will consult with the Animals Committee Chair, and will report back to SC 79. I see the Animals Committee Chair nodding, so I think I got that right. So can the Standing Committee agree to this? we move on to the next species, and I think it will be similar because we have the fortunate situation that all countries have in fact now responded. And so the Animals Committee will be able to review that information. And so we'll go through them just to get it correct for the record, but the next one is Chlamydotis mcqueenii from Kazakhstan, and I see if Standing Committee anyone wants to speak, otherwise I will give the floor to Kazakhstan too. So Kazakhstan, this is your chance to speak on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the colleagues from the Secretariat mentioned, the CITES Management Authority of Kazakhstan has provided appropriate response to the Animals Committee request to CITES Secretariat by email on January 29, 2005. Confirmation of receiving of the mentioned response was provided by CITES Secretariat on January 30, 2005. The response of Kazakhstan was published by CITES Secretariat as document number 22 of the chapter information documents of the present Standing Committee meeting materials. And while we are waiting for the review of the submitted information, we will make ourselves available to provide any clarification that may be required by the colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kazakhstan. As I said, these recommendations will be modified based on your information and go to Animals Committee, and thank you for your spirit of cooperation with the Animals Committee to answer any additional questions that come up. So on this one, then, I ask the Standing Committee if they can accept that way forward on this one. I see nodding heads, so we'll move to the next one concerning Dendrobratus aureatus from Nicaragua. A similar situation. The information has now been received. Animals Committee will review it and make recommendations to SC 79. Is that an acceptable way forward? I have Israel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to stop you on a roll here. I just would request some clarification. In the first one from Nicaragua, we made some special arrangement that the answer would come back to SC 79, but all the rest of these have response until 30th January 2026, which is a year away almost. So we want to clarify exactly why some are determined to give them a year to respond, and whereas we would rather see this process move up more quickly so that all of them would respond a little more quickly. So can you explain that a little better, please? Thank you.
Yeah, my apologies. My understanding from the Secretariat is that the process has moved up for everyone. So this is the recommendation that was made when we didn't have the information, but now that we have the information, the Animals Committee will review it and get back to Standing Committee at SC 79. So that is true. That changes just like it is for Nicaragua, will apply to Kazakhstan. It will apply to Nicaragua on this species. We're talking about SC 79. So we will have that rapid turnaround that you have requested. And I see the Animals Committee Chair nodding, so I've got it correct. It will be SC 79. My apologies that I wasn't clear. It was all of these are changing. This one, the next one is slightly different. This is concerning Macaca fascicularis from Cambodia, where there is a recommendation to suspend trade and has conditions, but we've heard that information has been provided. I think we may have some discussion on this particular case. So I open the floor to the Standing Committee, noting that the Animals Committee had made the recommendation to suspend trade in this species. I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on behalf of Asian region about combination of Macaca fascicularis and Cambodia, we understand there is concern about the high reproduction rate. However, as Annex 4 shows, the 33rd Animals Committee only agreed to retain the species countries combination and requested Cambodia to provide clarification about the high reproduction rates, and the matter would be considered at AC 34. After that, there has been a submission from Cambodia, but there was not enough discussion about that, especially no decision by the Animals Committee for the current recommendation of trade suspension for this combination. It is not in line with the usual procedure fixed by the resolution conf 17.7. No clear reason is provided for that. So we propose to treat this combination as the other combinations in the document. Have enough discussion in the Animals Committee with Cambodia, with the verification mission discussed in document 33.1. And we recommend trade suspension only if decided by the Animals Committee. Given that, we propose the amendment of the text of 24 small f, small I, just as same as the text in small g, small I. So retain Macaca fasciculus from the Cambodia in review until it clarifies whether, and keep A to C as it is. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Japan. That's clear what you're suggesting, and the chair did misspeak before. The recommendation to suspend trade was made by the Secretariat in consultation with the Animals Committee. So, but it's clear what you're asking for. You want this species from Cambodia treated like the other ones with the retention of little I, A, B, C, but giving them, not having a trade suspension, but asking them to report on that to AC 34. Okay, looking for others, I've got Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo my colleague from Japan and support the comment made by Japan. Thank you.
And sorry again, Japan had said AC 34. I repeated AC 34. It is SC 79. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for now, whether to align with the views expressed by the Asian representative and Kuwait, the two Asian representatives, or to take a different approach and go with the original suggestion. So I turn to other standing committee members to speak on this one. Not seeing any requests, I turn to parties, observer parties. Oh, I have the U.S. as a standing committee member, and then I'll turn to parties.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking as the United States, we wanted to seek clarification with regard to what is under consideration at present. It is whether or not a recommendation to suspend trade for the species-country combination of Cambodia Macaca fascicularis would be deferred until SC 79. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's basically what I heard from the Asian representatives, that they've made that suggestion based on the fact that Cambodia can provide information that would address the recommendations in big A, B, C, and little I.
Thank you, Chair. In that case, the United States would support that approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'll turn to countries, party observers. Oh, I have Cambodia, so we'll let Cambodia speak, and then I'll turn to the other party observers.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Cambodia would like to acknowledge document SC 78 35.1, but we strongly objection to this recommendation on the suspend trade as the following reason. First one, Cambodia already provided clarification to the CITES Secretariat on the three key point requests that I would like to reiterate. First, regarding the process of replacing breeder stock or facility, the option of utilize F1 individual, and also the subsequent generation of the F1 We already sent that document to the CITES Secretariat on the September 30, 2024. And also, as today early morning, we also sent another additional document. Secondly, we already addressed of that in that document that the high rate of the birth rate of the monkey in that document is from Cambodia is 0.3 to 1.28, which is you can see across of the farming long-tail macaque farm in the region. And this is in the same range. But I would like to clear on this matter because some of the information that provide to the Animal Committee and Standing Committee by the representative of the U.S., which is they use some of the information from the previous, I don't know, that some of the data that not confirmed by Cambodia, nor the agree to use by the U.S. court while they kind of in the process to litigation when they arrest one of our colleagues and they probably extract from the digital electronic device from our colleague and that this data cannot be used as this is, because all of this. That the one, but Cambodia, the birth rate is still 0.3 to 1.28, but in the CITES AC32 form, they say that what is the birth rate? We say 1.5, but 1.5 is the maximum kind of possible that the intensive farming is applied.
Can I ask you to please get to the conclusion?
Yeah, the conclusion, first of all, we would like to request that to create the intercession or in the session of the working group between Cambodia and U.S. to look at that information that they provide to the CITES Secretariat and the Animal Committee or Standing Committee and verify with us the formal information. First one. The second one, we also invited CITES Secretariat as in document 38, SC 38, 78 and document 31, 33.1 para 74H that we recommend, we agree that we invited Secretariat to come and visit, do assess that related to the macaque farming and also the implementation of all the CITES compliance in Cambodia. So that we have this too, and at this moment we, to not kind of jeopardize or to prejudice this kind of condition, we would like that the CITES Secretariat and the Standing Committee to take this kind of process as in accordance with the rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Cambodia. I call on Canada.
Thank you, Chair. So Canada agrees with the views expressed by Japan in terms of retaining Cambodia, but not putting a trade suspension in at this time. As mentioned under a previous agenda item by an observer, Canada is an importer of Macaca fascicularis from Cambodia. In particular, laboratories from Canada work with one institution in Cambodia, and each import is verified, and we have confidence that to date the animals received have been captive bred. Our veterinary experts have also examined some of the questions around the breeding numbers and feel comfortable with some of the information that has been provided by Cambodia, suggesting that there is some more work to be done in terms of looking at some of these issues prior to establishing any sort of suspension of trade. In this regard, Canada would in particular suggest that the verification mission that I believe we agreed under document 33.1 include visits to try to verify some of these issues, and then we can have a further discussion at SC 79. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I will call on China, and then I will, I have a standing committee member, Poland, requesting I'll go to Poland first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the original recommendations, but we also can support the compromise solution, provided that all the information in A, B, and C will be provided. As for the new information by Cambodia, we'd like to request to provide them in writing to be assessed properly by the Animals Committee intersessionally. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will call on China, and then I think I will just see if there's an observer organization wishing to speak, and I will try to sum up, because I think we've heard very much from the standing committee members, and I have a sense of where we're going in the room. So I will turn to China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trade suspension is not ends, but just a mean to facilitate a better implementation of the convention. The procedure to ban the trade of Cambodia is not proper. It's premature to single Cambodia out by recommending a suspension in trade at this time. China echoes Asian region members and proposed that the decision be deferred until the mission proposed in SC 78.33.1 and agreed in this morning's session has been conducted, and a thorough scientific assessment is done. This would respect the process and ensure any decision-making on the basis of verified facts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will call on one observer organization, and then I would like to consult with the Secretariat, because I think I'm seeing a way forward. I will call on Bioresearch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The National Association for Biomedical Research, or NABR, NABR, disagrees with the proposal to suspend trade. NABR represents hundreds of academic and professional societies, biomedical research companies, patient groups, and medical schools that rely on the humane and responsible use of animals in biomedical research. I'll briefly elaborate on 3 areas of our concern. First, NABR was made aware of this proposal only 2 weeks before this meeting, and like many others, has not had sufficient time to review the information submitted by the United States or the Kingdom of Cambodia concerning this matter. In our opinion, all parties and observers should have an opportunity to fully understand all data of concern before supporting a trade suspension. Secondly, I would note that the U.S. has now requested to defer a trade suspension after having previously sent information to the Standing Committee leading to a proposed suspension. That dichotomy alone suggests that the data needs to be better understood. NABR supports legal trade with Cambodia, and to that end has worked extensively with the U.S. government to develop genetics testing protocols that demonstrate legality. These protocols have been accepted in writing by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Law Enforcement Division. Further, it's our understanding that genetics testing facilities are already underway in Cambodia. Finally, we note the importance of this species in biomedical research globally, whether for childhood vaccines, your prescription medications, or cancer research. And we urge this committee to act with caution regarding potential suspensions of trade with any country regarding this species. Madam Chair, NABR objects to the proposed suspension and requests that consideration of this proposal be delayed until all parties are able to fully review and discuss the available information in the interest of transparency. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and at this point, my apologies to those still wishing to speak, but I would like to consult with the Secretariat. I think we have heard from the Standing Committee in particular on this item, so let me see what the way forward will be. Okay, I had asked the Secretariat to work on some wording on this one, so I'd like to give them a little bit of time to revise the recommendation based on the discussions that we've heard. And so I'll move on to the other cases, and we'll come back to this one in a few minutes. So the next one is G, concerning Macaca fascicularis from the Philippines, and the Philippines has now provided information, and so essentially these recommendations would be modified, as we've heard for the other species, except for the Cambodian one yet, we haven't made any decision there, that we would postpone this with the Animals Committee looking at the information received till SC 79. Is that acceptable way forward from the Standing Committee on the Philippines? I guess I should see if there's anyone who wants to speak on the Philippines example. I guess I'm moving a bit too fast, but I'm trying to catch up. So is there anyone, Standing Committee member, party, or observer organizations wanting to speak on Macaca fascicularis from the Philippines? I have the Philippines, I thought so.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We understand on the decision made that this will be taken up on the SC 79, but if you permit us, we would like to have some clarification on the three aspects made in the decisions. So, thank you, Madam Chair. The Philippines would like to request a reconsideration of the committee's recommendation that its trade of Macaca fascicularis be placed under review for the following reasons. Over the 5 years period from 2018 to 2022, the average annual export of live captive-bred Macaca fascicularis from the Philippines was only 452 individuals. This figure reflects the limited scale of our trade, which is far from what could be considered unsustainable or excessive. Also, the Philippine CITES Management Authority did not issue a one-off or annual quota of 8,000 as reflected in our previous communication during the 2018 to 2022 period, but issued permits in 2020 for the collection of 2,500 individuals for 3 years. The collected individuals are being used as parental stocks. As we all know, the Philippines does not allow export of wild macaque fascicularis. The reference quota of 8,000 macacas was an annual allowable quota set in 1990, which was stopped in 1994 and has not been valid since this time period. Prior to the recent issuance of permits for wild collection, no permits has been issued for wild macacas since 2009. The last export of wild-caught macacas were in 2002, with only 100 wild-caught individuals were exported. All macaques in the breeding facilities are permanently marked with tattoos. This includes progeny as well as parental stock, even those collected under permits. The Philippines employs permanent tattoos as an identification system to ensure traceability and accountability. We have already submitted.
Excuse me, Philippines, I'm sorry, but we are running out of time. If this information is contained in your INF document, can you just refer to it here? What I'm looking for right now is if you can support the recommendation that the Animals Committee reviews the information that you have, and it will be discussed at SC 79. You don't need to present to the committee all the information that's in your INF document.
Yes, we support that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, just trying to speed us along because I know we're really behind now. Okay, so can the Standing Committee agree to that for the Philippines? I'm seeing nodding heads. So we move to the Vietnam situation, which is similar to the Philippines. They've provided information now. The Animals Committee would look at that information, and we would make a decision at SC 79 if Vietnam is present, if there was something they would like to add here. But please don't repeat the information that you've already given to the Animals Committee and the Secretariat. Thank you. I call on Vietnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be really quick. So under the request of the Animal Committee and the Secretariat, Vietnam had responded by the submission of 2 reports on long-tailed monkey, Macara fascicularis, produced in captivity in September 2023 and October 2024. To follow up, a clarification meeting was held in person with the participation of national management authorities, scientific authorities, and the Secretariat during the recent technical mission conducted in January 2025 in Vietnam. Further questions raised in this paragraph 25H to the present document has been presented and clarified by Vietnam in the course of the mission, and the report has been published as information document number 14, covering detailed information on domestic breeding facilities, offspring production, founder stock origin, registration and inspection manner, and legal framework in control of trade and traceability. Vietnam wished that information document 14 fulfill the request for clarification and propose the Standing Committee to consider removing Vietnam from paragraph 25. We thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vietnam. If I understand, you would like to be removed at this point in the process, but my understanding from the Animals Committee Chair is that the Animals Committee needs to review that information that's in your information document to see if it satisfies the requirements under the resolution and the process. So unless I see support from the Standing Committee to remove you, I think that the gist is that you will be treated as the other cases, and Animals Committee will review that. We will respect our process under the resolution, and we will hear a report at SC 79. So you will be retained until SC 79, but there is no trade suspension. So it's basically just giving the Animals Committee, which is the technical committee of CITES, the opportunity to review this. So is that an acceptable way forward to the Standing Committee? I see nodding heads, and I hope Vietnam can accept that. Thank you. Moving on to, I guess we can now go back to Cambodia. The Secretariat has drafted a decision that we discussed, and so it would read, and this is what I particularly would like the Standing Committee to pay attention to, so I'll try to be slow. With regards to paragraph 25, subparagraph F, concerning Macaca fascicularis from Cambodia, the Standing Committee notes that the Animals Committee will consider the additional information provided by Cambodia and the outcomes of the mission to Cambodia to be undertaken, subject to external funding through the intersessional consultation process provided for in paragraph 2.0 of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev Cop 19, and report back to SC 79. So this is a little different. It's not just review the information, but if any information comes forward from the mission to Cambodia, that would also be considered by the Animals Committee in their recommendations. So I know Cambodia invited the mission, so I hope that this is an acceptable way to phrase this recommendation, and I look to the Standing Committee members, and if Cambodia wants to speak to it, I will allow that. Disappeared. I have Cambodia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the new draft text on the para 25F, Cambodia is agree with that, and we welcome the CITES Secretariat as well as the respective Standing Committee or Animal Committee can join that kind of mission to Cambodia and to see by, to verify the fact base, not the allegation and some of the information that provided by third party. Thank you.
Thank you. So then I look to the Standing Committee members if this is an acceptable way forward on the case from Cambodia for the macaque. I'm seeing nodding heads, so we will conclude that one and move on to little I concerning Ufega Pulmona from Nicaragua. Again, similar situation, and information has now been provided. Animals Committee would look at it and report back to SC 79. So I'm looking for any standing committee members, observer parties who wish to speak to that, and if Nicaragua would like to speak to it, I'll open the floor to them first. Not seeing any requests for the floor, so I look to the standing committee if we can agree with that way forward. Seeing nodding heads, we'll move on. Moved on to J concerning Testudo Gracia from Jordan, similar situation. No. Yeah. That we now have received information from Jordan. The Animals Committee would review that information and get back to us with recommendations at SC 79. Anybody wishing to, any standing committee member, observer party, or observer organization wishing to speak to this? I have WCS.
Thank you, Chair. This is not specific on the issue of Testudo Greca from Jordan. The document itself says AC 34 and Jordan should respond by 30 January 2026. Just confirming that you have said that this will be discussed as was intervened by the delegate from Israel. All of these need to be responded in time for review by SC 79, not to be submitted a year from now and discussed at AC 34. Just seeking clarification. Thank you.
Apologies if I wasn't clear, but yes, the documents, that information will need to be reviewed by Animals Committee for whatever the submission deadline would be by SC 79, and it will be discussed at SC 79. So any text in this document where it says AC 34, 30 January, that is no longer valid. I hope that's clear now. It's SC 79. So I will move on to K. K, concerning Testo Horsfeldii from Uzbekistan. Essentially, they have provided information. I understand they want to speak, so I will call on them. But we are considering the same type of recommendation, that basically they would be retained, their information looked at by Animals Committee, and we would receive recommendations from Animals Committee at SC 79. So if Uzbekistan would like to speak to this one, I call on them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the last months, we have held several consultative meetings with Secretariat and Animals Committee. It was very useful for us. We have provided more additional information on Testudo Horsfeldii from Uzbekistan. According to the questions of the Animals Committee and the recommendations of the Animals Committee and Secretariat reflected in item 34 is well understood. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else wishing to speak? And I now have text that on all these cases that we have discussed. Oh, I see the Poland and then the UK. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding recommendation K concerning Testudo Horsfeldii from Uzbekistan, we agree with the proposed way forward, but we would like to point out that concerns were raised regarding the discrimination of specimens of different source codes, as well as the application of source code R, that is not in line with Resolution Conf 1116 on ranching. While we acknowledge the substantial information shared by Uzbekistan, as well as the overview table on different facilities in VDOC 34, we still agree to retain the species in the review, and we propose to add to seeking clarifications on the productivity of each breeding facility and nursery, we suggest to add here the productivity of each breeding facility nursery by source codes, and on how it will be ensured that specimens of different source codes can be discriminated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I turn to the UK.
Thank you, Chair, and we welcome the information provided by Uzbekistan. We agree with the suggestion by our colleague from Poland, and I think noting the intention for Animals Committee to review the information between now and SC 79, we think it would be beneficial to invite Uzbekistan to provide that additional clarification around the individual source codes and how they're differentiated and managed. We also think it would be beneficial to provide more details about what measures they're taking to ensure that specimens taken from the wild, including offspring produced from gravid females or eggs collected in the wild, are not being exported as specimens reported as produced in captivity under source code F or C. We also think it would be useful for Uzbekistan to address the specific and detailed queries provided by Animals Committee in Annex 4. And I think this additional clarification would really help us, assist us in understanding how they're applying source codes and the associated production systems and methods, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let me consult on that one. I understand what there may be some additional information that is requested of Uzbekistan for Animals Committee to proceed on this one. So I guess I look to Uzbekistan if they've heard these comments and if there is additional information that could be provided between now and when the Animals Committee reviews this, addressing those concerns expressed. I call on Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Chair. We are now in the process of reviewing the legislation related to CITES in Uzbekistan. We understand that there is different definition on our code. So we had some consultations with Animals Committee on that. We are in the process of revising this, our legislation on that.
Thank you. So can I ask Poland and the UK to submit these questions to the Secretariat, and in their consultation with the Animals Committee, they will work with Uzbekistan to address those questions, and when we discuss it again at SC 79, that there'll be more information available. I look to Poland and the UK if that's, I see nodding. So if you could please get your questions to the Secretariat, who will then work with the Animals Committee to address those in Uzbekistan. Then I think we can conclude this one if the Standing Committee agrees, and this is the way we'll move forward on this one. I see nodding heads. Okay. Now we come to Testudo little L concerning Testudo clymeni from Egypt, and essentially Egypt has also provided information to the Secretariat, and so it would be the same type of recommendation that we have had for the previous cases, Animals Committee reviewing it and going to SC 79. So I open the floor to anyone wishing to speak on this one. If Egypt is here, I would give the floor to them first, but that is my way forward on this particular case. Not seeing any requests to speak, I look to the Standing Committee members if they can concur with that. Seeing nodding heads, thank you. And that leaves us, the last case is Testudo Climani from the Syrian Arab Republic. This one is different than the previous ones. There has been no response to the Secretariat's requests for information. And so the recommendations that are presented in this document, little I, triple I, are the recommendations that would be going forward on this one. And basically, it would be considered at
AC 34.
At AC 34, unless, but if they get information, Secretariat gets information in a more timely response, they could consult with the Animals Committee Chair when they do these other cases. But right now, it would read the way it is. So, anyone wishing to speak to this one? I have I have Israel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Testudo climani is a critically endangered species of turtle that has only 3 range states, Egypt, Libya, and Israel. And we're very concerned about this species. There was trade that came from this party that there was a question of whether they were being misidentified as Testudo gretii, which is a common tortoise and is not endangered, it's only vulnerable. So the identification of the species that's being in trade from Syria and where it's coming from and what's going on is a big question. And as you said, there was no response from Syria. So we would recommend that the Standing Committee have a trade suspension of all Testudo species from the Syrian Arabic Republic in effect at this time until clarification is reached because of the misidentification and not clear if they're marketing the climani species under the name of gretii or exactly what's going on. So with that kind of trade suspension on all Testudo species, hopefully they will not be accepted by other parties if they try to export them. Thank you, Chair.
So if the Chair understands you correctly, you are inserting a new recommendation that would result in a suspension of trade from Syria on any Testudo SPA, not just climate, until information is provided on the identification. And okay, that's a new recommendation. So I look to the Standing Committee members to see if there's support for that recommendation. Any party observer parties wishing to speak? I know people may need a bit of time, the Standing Committee, to think of this because this is new. I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that that may be a step too far at this stage. Certainly, if it was the other way round, that if climani was native to Syria and was being passed off as being a common species, then that could be a valid approach. But I think we would like to have a bit more time to consider this, and maybe, Standing Committee 79 would be the appropriate place to impose a trade ban rather than here with little information.
Yeah, the Chair would also like to reflect that what was referred to the Standing Committee from the Animals Committee was this particular one species and the country that it was coming from, according to the resolution, and we're now suggesting a trade suspension. I understand the reasons why, of all Testudo from that country. So I do have some concerns with that we're not following the resolution per se, and perhaps it's as Oceania has suggested, better to try to get a response. I urge the regional representatives for that region Morocco and others to reach out to the Syrian Arab Republic to try to get a response, because I think it will be difficult at SC 79 if no information has been received. But I asked to see if Israel could accept that recommendation and let the recommendations remain as they are, but recognizing that we all should do our best to try to reach out to the Syrian Arab Republic and essentially
for a breeding facility for this species, and also in the previous report from Egypt. But as you said, there may be something to do with the resolution not being properly managed, so we will withdraw the request to have an immediate trade suspension, and hopefully the information can then come to SC 79, not to AC 34. Thank you.
thank you, Israel, for that. And with that, I look to the Standing Committee to accept these recommendations. And also, maybe the Standing Committee can encourage, through its regional representative, to reach out to the Syrian Arab Republic to help get a response. Is that an acceptable way forward? I see nodding heads, so we'll conclude this one. And then we're left with, so the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in subparagraph M. I'm going to open the floor. This is moving away from species and case studies to the comments on the proposed amendment to paragraph 2H of Resolution Comp 17.7 as presented in subparagraph N of paragraph 25. And so look to Standing Committee members first for any comments on the proposed amendment. Not seeing any, I move on to observer parties. I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Concerning recommendation N, we generally agree with the proposed amendment of the resolution. Likewise, we note that the term founder stock, as referred to in Resolution Conf 17.7, differs from the term breeding stock, as used in Resolution Conf 10.16, and clarification might be needed on whether the different wording was intentional. We see merit in ensuring consistent use and separation of these two terms, as they refer to different things, and would like to refer to the workshop on captive breeding proposed under document 62 to also discuss whether the two different terms should continue to be used or if they should be aligned in case the workshop will be envisaged. Thank you.
This was a recommendation that came from the Animals Committee. I don't know if the Animals Committee Chair has anything to comment on this particular. I take Poland's point. I think right now we are looking at this amendment the way it is, but I take your point that we will need to discuss this when maybe the workshop can address this inconsistent use. But my understanding is that in recommendations we've had in the past that basically the Animals Committee has used founder stock here rather than breeding stock. And that was intentional, if I'm correct, from the discussion at AC. I call on Switzerland as the AC chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm, as this term was already used before in this relation, I think we should wait until we have a decision whether we should always use the same term, which I personally would, of course, agree. We shouldn't use different terms, but that's the way it is at the moment in this resolution, so we should keep it, I think.
Thank you. I have New Zealand.
Yes, I agree with the chair of the Animals Committee. The term founder stock is used in 17.7, and that was the point I was trying to make earlier under legal acquisition finding, is that we've got these two different terms, and I think founder stock is a much better term than breeding or parental stock throughout a variety of our resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm hearing that preference among standing committee members that we retain what the resolution uses, the terminology founder stock, but I would ask Poland to raise this when we discuss document 62 in the workshop. I think this is something that the workshop will probably need to address, and at some point will hopefully reconcile, as Canada and others have said in the discussion of many of these captive situations, what we mean by founder stock and what we mean by breeding stock, and when we use which one and which one. I think this will be a much lengthier discussion and not germane to just this recommendation. So I suggest we accept the recommendation as is, and I'm seeing nodding heads. I also would like to see if any observer parties wish to speak to this, to be fair. So I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to speak to this. Otherwise, I think I have agreement on the standing committee, but I don't want to suppress discussion just to save time. Okay, not seeing any requests, then essentially I see that the standing committee agrees to recommendation N in this document, and then we have one more, I think, or maybe two more. So the other thing the Standing Committee is invited to do in this document is to review and agree to submit the draft decisions presented in subparagraph O of paragraph 25. And I won't repeat what that decision is. I ask you to look at it and open the floor for any discussion to this draft decision. Seeing any requests from standing committee members, I will turn to observer parties, observer organizations, and in this case, I take silence, but I'll look for nodding heads, that the standing committee agrees to the recommendation in O and agrees to submit this draft decision presented in subparagraph O of paragraph 25 for consideration at COP 20. Do I have nodding heads? Okay. Just silence always disturbs me somehow if people accept things by silence. I want to be fair. Okay. Then, before I close, I need to come back to which one?
Recommendation C, just we get it right for the record.
All right, I need to come back to recommendation C on Cambodia. I think we reached a decision, but we want to be correct on the wording. So I will call on the Secretariat to read that wording.
Thank you, Chair. It's not particularly on Cambodia, Macaca fascicularis. I think that one was quite clear. It's on the other ones that was within that C to L, because we have two that were slightly different. So just for the record, we want to make sure everybody understands what the committee is saying it's agreeing on here. So with regards to paragraph 25, subparagraphs C, D, E, G, H, I, J, and L, basically everything except for K and F, which is the Cambodia one. And K is the Uzbekistan Testudo Horsfieldii. So all of the other cases, the Standing Committee notes that the Animals Committee will consider the additional information provided by the respective countries through the intersessional consultation process provided for in paragraph 2.0 of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev Cop 19 and report back to SC 79. With regards to paragraph 25, subparagraph K on Testudo Horsfieldii from Uzbekistan, The Standing Committee invites Poland and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to submit their questions to the Secretariat for inclusion in its intersessional consultation process in terms of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev COP 19. And then actually, now that I realise it, K should be up in the first summation. That's just an extra recommendation. And then, as we read earlier, with regards to paragraph 25, subparagraph F, concerning Macaca fascicularis from Cambodia, the Standing Committee notes that the Animals Committee will consider the additional information provided by Cambodia and the outcomes of the mission to Cambodia to be undertaken, subject to external funding, through the intersessional consultation process provided for in paragraph 2.0 of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev COP 19, and report back to SC 79.
So having heard this, I look to the Standing Committee that this is basically the wording that we would like to go forward, that we agreed to. Seeing nodding heads, so accepted. And we're done with 35.1. And now understand why the Animals Committee Chair always says not to select so many cases, because it's hard to work through the results of them too. Okay, moving on to agenda item 35.2, review of Resolution Comp 17.7, Rev COP 19. I turn to the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you, Chair. This document has been prepared by the Secretariat in consultation with the Chair of the Animals Committee and reports on the implementation of decisions 19.63 to 19.62 on review of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev COP 19. A comparative analysis of the objectives and processes outlined in this resolution and Resolution Conf 12.8 Rev COP 18 on review of significant trade in specimens of Appendix 2 species was presented to the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee, which the Animals Committee agreed that the comparative analysis demonstrates that the two processes are different in terms of their scope, purpose and methodologies. In addition, experience with the captive breeding review process is still relatively limited, while the review of significant trade process has been established for over 2 decades. The Secretariat concludes once again that there is no need to continue with the process of reviewing Resolution Conf 17.7 and Resolution Conf 12.8 to streamline and align these resolutions, I should say at this time. The Animals Committee agreed to propose a minor amendment to paragraph 2D of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev COP 19 to amend an incorrect reference, which the Animals Committee will submit to COP 20. So the Standing Committee is hereby invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 13. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And this is one of those documents that I had early on said in our opening remarks. We look to the advice of our technical committee, which has made their recommendations and analysis here. And so I'm looking to the Standing Committee members in particular, whether they can support and agree with what the Animals Committee is recommending. So I open the floor to the Standing Committee members, and I have Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, we fully support the recommendations on this document. We just want to make one small point, please. We had flagged on the previous item before you closed it, and I don't think you saw my flag, that at the time when the Secretariat gave the final analysis, she forgot to mention subparagraph M. So we just want to be sure technically that that's included also. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel, and my apologies for not seeing you on the screen. I will ask the Secretariat to confirm that M is included in that one.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. I can confirm that M is included. I think I was trying to get your attention, but I did have some, is it different wording? Sorry, but it is slightly different wording, so if you just bear with me a moment, I'll get that so I can read that into the record as well. So thank you for raising that. disappeared. Thank you. I have misplaced the exact wording here, but it is the same as the recommendations for M at the moment, with an additional request to ask the regional representative to reach out to Syria to try to get some information in the meantime. I hope that clarifies, and thank you for the reminder.
And thank you to Israel for keeping us on our toes to make sure we have the correct wording. It is important, and my apologies for rushing. So with that, I open the discussion again on 35.2, and I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The North America region agrees with the Secretariats and Animals Committee's conclusion that while Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev Cop 19 and Resolution Conf 12.8 Rev Cop 18 appear to be similar, the two processes are quite different in terms of their scope, purpose, and methodologies. Our region supports the recommendation to propose to COP 20 the minor amendment to correct the cross-reference in paragraph 2D of Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev Cop 19, as summarized in paragraph 10 of document SC 78, Doc 35.2, and that there is no need to submit substantial recommendations on streamlining the resolutions to COP 20. Finally, we agree decisions 19.63 to 19.65 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at COP 20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other standing committee members wishing to speak on this? I will open it up to observer parties. I have the United Kingdom.
Thanks, Chair. We support the intervention made by the US and support the recommendations in the document. Thank you.
Thank you. Observer parties, not seeing any requests. I look to observer organizations. Not seeing any requests, I will propose this as the conclusion. The Standing Committee agrees with the Animals Committee conclusion that there is no need to continue with the process of reviewing Resolution Conf 17.7 and Resolution Conf 12.8, Rev Cop 18, to streamline and align these resolutions. Standing Committee notes the proposed amendment to Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev Cop 19 to be submitted by the Animals Committee to COP 20, and that decisions 19.63 to 19.65 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at COP 20. So I look for the Standing Committee's agreement of that conclusion. And I see nodding heads. Thank you. And we can conclude with this agenda item. And we are now on our regular afternoon schedule. And give me a minute to gather my papers. Wishful thinking on my part. We're on item 62 from the morning yet, which is the review of the CITES provisions related to trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source, decision 19.179, document 62, and I call on the working group chair to report on this. Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm presenting the results of this working group I had the pleasure of co-chairing together with Canada. At COP 18, several decisions were taken in relation to the provisions on trade in specimens not of wild source, specifically targeting Resolution Conf 10.16, Rev Cop 19, and Resolution Conf 12.3, Rev Cop 19. A roadmap was developed and agreed upon by the working group, which contained a number of questions related to such trade. Those questions were also distributed to all parties through notification 2024/003, and were basically intended to examine the current implementation of Article 7, paragraphs 4 and 5 of the Convention, in order to determine if this implementation responds appropriately and proportionally to the risks identified with trade in specimens of non-wild origin. The Animals and Plants Committee also provided their insights from a scientific perspective, which can be found in the relevant documents discussed during PC 27 and AC 33. Unfortunately, the working group was not able to advance further on the matter. However, as both Canada and Belgium felt that this discussion remains highly relevant, as it touches upon a large part of today's trade in CITES-listed species, we shared our views and options for potential ways forward with the group, as is mentioned in the document. Based on the feedback of the working group, the only viable way forward was the drafting of a new decision, which can be found in the annex of the document. These draft decisions call for a workshop to discuss these important issues and is now put before the Standing Committee for approval, as mentioned in the recommendations in paragraph 10 of the document. Thank you.
Thank you. I draw the Standing Committee and everyone's attention that the recommendations from the working group are included in paragraph 10. And so we will be discussing paragraph 10, and I open the floor to the Standing Committee members. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the difficulty we've had as parties to make progress on this issue, despite the able co-chairing of this working group by Canada and Belgium. In this regard, we support the recommendations provided, including Recommendation C, proposing a draft decision to convene a workshop to resolve the outstanding points relating to specimens not of wild source, a number of which have been discussed so far at SC 78. This is a complex area and will be a difficult workshop to design and structure to enable us to make the progress we're looking to. And so we suggest adding a new paragraph B into decision 20AA to give parties an opportunity to provide feedback on the terms of reference and modus operandi for the workshop. The additional subparagraph would read as follows. B, share the draft terms of reference and modus operandi via a notification for comments from parties to be considered by the Secretariat in consultation with the chairs of the Standing Committee and the Animals and Plants Committees before finalisation. Thank you.
Can I please ask the UK to repeat it one more time to be sure we've recorded the additional paragraph correctly?
Yep, so it would be B, share the draft terms of reference and modus operandi via a notification for comments from parties to be considered by the Secretariat in consultation with the chairs of the Standing Committee and the Animals and Plants Committees before finalisation.
Thank you, UK. And so now we have an additional paragraph, so I'm asking you to comment not only on the recommendations, but also then the suggestion by the UK. So I have Poland, followed then by the USA.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We take note of the report and agree with the recommendations, including the proposed draft decisions for COP20. We support organizing the technical workshop on the topic to analyze broadly issues connected with specimens not of wild origin, as we already mentioned, including issues of founder breeding stock. In that spirit, we also support the suggestion by the UK. Thank you.
Thank you. That was clear. I turn to the USA.
Thank you, Chair. We also support the suggestion from the European representative for the additional text here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other Standing Committee members wishing to speak on this? I will turn to observer parties. Not seeing any requests. Oh, European, I didn't get to organizations yet, but I will now. The observer organizations, and I have a request by the European Pet Organization, if I got that correctly. It gets abbreviated on my screen.
Thank you for allowing me the floor. I'm also speaking on behalf of a number of other pet trade and keeping organizations whose names I will provide to the Secretariat. We support the draft decisions 20AE, 20AA and 20BB as outlined in the Standing Committee document 62 for a technical workshop to review the CITES provisions related to trade in specimens of animals and plants not of wild source. When drafting terms of reference and modus operandi for this technical workshop, we would urge parties to consider input from stakeholders, particularly regarding barriers to captive breeding currently present within the CITES resolutions relating to trade in specimens not of wild source. These barriers can have unintended negative consequences for conservation, which have been noted by several parties and observer organizations in recent CITES meetings. Thank you, Chair.
And I have a request from Pro Wildlife, and then I think I will end this list of speakers and conclude.
Thank you, Chair. Pro Wildlife is holding this intervention on behalf of 9 organizations whose names can be provided to the Secretariat. Standing Committee 77 called on parties to restrict imports of captive bred specimens of Appendix 1 species for primarily commercial purposes to those produced in CITES registered facilities and to refuse any permit or certificates used under Article 7.4 if the specimens in questions do not originate from a registered facility. See document 33.8. Trade in such species is associated with a variety of problems and risks. At the same time, there is no evidence that a relaxation of trade requirements would benefit conservation. Since the establishment of the working group, little progress has been made due to disagreement on whether the ease of the trade requirements for specimens traded as non-wild and/or to limit the application of the registration system for operations breeding Appendix 1 species for commercial purposes. In the absence of an agreement in the working group on the need to amend Resolution Conf 1016 Rev Cop 19 or Resolution Conf 1210 Rev Cop 19, we suspect that it is unlikely that a workshop recommended by the co-chairs of the working group will lead to a solution. We therefore recommend the Standing Committee to reject the draft decision and bring the discussion to a close. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've had discussion. I think I would now like to summarize where my conclusions and see where the Standing Committee falls out. The Standing Committee would note the report of the working group and relevant background documents. The Standing Committee notes the analysis and conclusions from the Animals and Plants Committee as found in document PC 27, document 21, AC 33, document 25, Rev 1, including those referenced in paragraph 5 of this document. And this is the important one, agreed to submit to COP 20. The Standing Committee agrees to submit to COP 20 new draft decisions found in the annex to the present document as amended by the UK to replace decision 19.179 to 19.180. So I look to the Standing Committee members if I've basically, based on the discussion, summarized the conclusions correctly. I'm seeing nodding heads, so this will be recorded and move forward. And now we can conclude the morning's agenda. I would like to begin discussion I will do them one by one, but these documents are interrelated, documents 65.1 through 65.5 on elephants. And one thing I would like to remind everyone of, because this will become important, is that the Mike Etis subgroup membership was agreed at SC 76, and the composition of that Mike and Etis subgroup is as follows. The 4 African elephant range states, 2 Anglophone and 2 Francophone are Chad, Kenya, Senegal, and Zambia. 2 Asian range states, China and Indonesia, and 2 representatives from Europe and North America, represented by Belgium as the chair of the Mike Etis subgroup and the United States of America. And the terms of reference for the Mike Etis subgroup, which is included under the modus operandi, is meetings of the Mike and Etis subgroup are open to members of the Mike and Etis Technical Advisory Group, representatives of the IUCN SSC, African and Asian Elephant Specialist Group, and any other observers as agreed to by the Mike and Etis subgroup. This will become important to know how the Mike and Etis subgroup works and the membership as we discuss the following documents. So, yeah, so we're starting with this one. Yeah. So we start with document 65.1, implementation of RC 10.10, Rev Cop 19, and decisions 19.35 and 19.37. And I turn to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. This document provides an update on the implementation of paragraph 12 of Resolution Conf 1010. The pike analysis shows a downward trend in Africa and remains stable in Asia. ETI's analysis shows a slight increase in ivory seizures. The number of tasks reported in trade by range states and importers increased between 2019 and 2022. A new AEF steering committee has been established, and the Forest Elephant Status Report is nearing completion. The document also introduces a new phase of the Mike and ETIS program. In addition, the Mike ETIS subgroup will discuss the documents outlined in paragraph 66 and report its findings and recommendations to the committee later at the present meeting. The Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 67 of the document. Thank you.
So I turn everyone's attention to the recommendations as you heard in paragraph 67, and I open the floor to Standing Committee members. I will move on to observer parties. I have DRC and Kenya as both are Standing Committee members, so I give the floor first to the DRC.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The sub-region Central Africa would like to congratulate the Secretariat and the partners for having carried out this analysis. The sub-region takes good note of the results presented in the report. However, we would like to cover a fundamental question, which is that linked to the socio-economic issues linked to human-elephant conflict, and we'd like them to be taken into account. This matter of conflict is a priority subject in the African Elephant Plan, and there are still many challenges that are not all covered. Now, in Africa, there were 67 projects set up linked to document 78.15, and it was 4.5 million, but that was an average. It's an average of $65,000, which appears insufficient in terms of the needs to cover human-elephant conflict. So we would suggest and request the strengthening of these projects so that there is a mobilization of resources necessary to meet the socio-economic needs of this subject. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Kenya would also like to thank the Secretariat for preparing document 65.1. Madam Chair, it will be good for the committee to take note of the large-scale ivory seizures that continue to be reported since 2021. And also that there have been a decline on pike. But if you read through the report, the situation of poaching in Central and West Africa still remains an issue. Madam Chair, we need to raise very important questions about the other sources of recently seized ivory. If you are seeing a decline in poaching and the seizures are high, and then there could be a possibility of leakage from stockpiles, as well as some mismanagement of remaining domestic ivory markets that are not closed, that could be contributing to the laundering of ivory that continue to be a problem. Madam Chair, we wish to support and we wish to support the recommendation to the committee for the review of the proposed changes to the CITES data collection form as contained in the present document, and also the proposal and call on the donors for funding of CITES, because it is through data collection that we'll be able to know whether data available guides us here, just like in this case. There is a big issue that the committees will take note as we go towards other documents that is this agenda. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. I would ask the following speakers to focus on the recommendations in paragraph 67. In particular, many of the items are for the Standing Committee to take note, and we can note some of the concerns, but what the one recommendation that I now have heard from Kenya on is to, if Standing Committee members support and agree to the proposed changes to the CITES data collection form as contained in Annex 1D. That's one thing we definitely need to comment on, and is more of an action item than taking note. So I will move on. I have Singapore, and then I'm starting to see parties wanting to speak. So I will turn to Singapore and Sudan.
Madam Chair, Singapore recognizes the importance of trade route data to provide insights to our collective efforts to combat illegal ivory trade. CITES, as a global international information system holding details of seizures and confiscation of elephant ivory, must ensure that its data is accurate and verified. Singapore would like to emphasize the importance of data verification and data accuracy used in the CITES analysis. This is particularly vital given that such data directly affects the analysis and consequently the determination of parties to be included in the National Ivory Action Plan. Hence, Singapore would like to emphasize that unverified data must not be used. In view of these concerns, Singapore would like to propose an amendment to the CITES data collection form regarding trade route information in Annex 1D of document 65.1. We suggest modifying the proposed question by inserting the word verified before trade route information. The revised question would read as follows. Is verified trade route data information available for this seizure? Verified trade route information should be supported by official documentation such as bill of lading, shipping manifests, customs declaration forms, and cross-check with control border authorities. This can be included as a footnote in the data collection form. We believe this amendment will foster more rigorous data verification processes, thereby enhancing the overall quality, reliability, and credibility of the CITES analysis. This, in turn, will strengthen our collective efforts in combating illegal ivory trade. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on Sudan, and I ask parties to start to really be brief. We've got several of these documents to go through, so really speak to the essence of the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. About item 65.1, Sudan welcomes the downward pike trend, however, urges parties to maintain their enforcement efforts to sustain the positive downward. Concerning 127 paragraph, Sudan wishes and supports the focusing on Standing Committee trying to develop a strategic plan for the fund and increase supporting the African elephant range countries with technical means in order to strengthen their efforts to reduce illegal ivory trade and extensive anti-poaching law and enforcement. About item 65.4, Sudan urges the Standing Committee to renew decision.
Excuse me, Delegate from Sudan. We're not on item 65.4 yet, so could I ask you to please keep your comments on that document and other documents until we reach that agenda item? We are on 65.1.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I call on Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to support the recommendation with the edit made by Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I ask parties to be as concise as Kuwait just was, because that's what I'm looking for. I call on Najir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we need to make it clear that while analyses show that the figures are looking good, let's not rest on our laurels. We've seen that there are still large-scale ivory seizures taking place, and we also know that poaching is still a problem in some of the range states. Recent ivory seizures do show that there's a need to close the gaps that there still are in order to ensure that we don't have any further illegal trade in ivory. In other words, we absolutely need to improve our stockpile management systems and ensure that there are no leaks from these stockpiles of ivory. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We agree to all the recommendations and do not agree to the requested addition from Singapore on uploading information on the trade route. We think this is not necessary to do that, and definitely not on each and every occasion. So we prefer to have only the amendments as presented in the document 65.1 Annex 1D. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I am definitely looking for interventions. I've got several parties wishing to speak. I ask you to really speak to paragraph 67, particularly the CITES data collection and the proposed amendments. Some of the other commentary I think is more appropriate as we get into discussion of other documents or at the COP itself. And so I give the floor to Zimbabwe, and then I have Singapore requesting a second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zimbabwe agrees with the recommendations, all of them on paragraph 67. And with regards to paragraph D and E, we wish to note that the program which was being supported, the MIC program, is very important, and it remains important for our populations in Africa. And there were many sites that are being supported, and it will be really important for the donor parties and other supporting institutions to continue supporting this program, because this is what has resulted even in the pike levels that are desirable that we have observed. So it's just a plea to a request for continued support of these important programs, because if we stop them at a time when we've seen positive results, we might actually start to see other trends that are not desirable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for this important point. I think that'll be noted in the longer summary record from this meeting. I have Singapore asking for a second time, so I ask you to please be brief. I hope it's in regard to your amendment.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to make a quick clarification. I think we're not asking to upload trade data information like what Belgium has suggested, but what we are suggesting or proposing is in specific to recommendation 67C. We wanted to add in the word verify in front of the question, so it reads as it's verify, so insert verify, trade route information available for this seizure. So we're not proposing new information, but we just want it to be verified. I hope that addresses Belgium's concern. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have two more parties which I'll entertain, and then I'll look for observer organizations, because I realize I should have called on some specific ones involved. Oh, I have the USA now as a standing committee member, so I'll go to the USA and then try to have, no. USA is withdrawing. I have Senegal. I ask you to be brief and speak to the recommendations, followed by China.
Merci. Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern has been expressed by Niger, but I would like to add one thing to what Niger has said. I would like to encourage parties and the Standing Committee to bear these issues in mind when we come to the other documents relating to elephants. This including national ivory market stockpiles and national ivory action programs. Let's keep these issues in mind so that we're in a position to better manage our stockpiles. These major seizures we've been talking about may very well be the result of poor stock management. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Senegal. I turn to China as the last observer party to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank Singapore for the clarification of their intent for the edits, and Singapore has our full support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now turn to observer organizations, and my preference would be if any of the following organizations wish to speak. I have them. Okay. I will turn to traffic.
Thank you, Chair.
Traffic looks for the guidance of the parties and the Mike EDIS subgroup in terms of any changes to the EDIS data collection form to encourage the best quality of information in line with the requirements in Annex 1 of ResConf 1010 Rev COP 19 to provide reliable trade estimate and to allow for increased interoperability between EDIS and the AITR. On the matters of financial and operational sustainability of EDIS and recommendation 67D, Traffic thanks the parties that contribute regularly to the program. We would like to highlight that financial insecurities may result in larger budget uncertainties than presented in paragraph 64 of the document and table 1 in paragraph 45 of Annex 1. Therefore, Traffic reminds the parties of the high priority EDIS review recommendation to ensure financial resources are allocated so that EDIS meets its operational requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on IUCN.
Thank you, Chair. The IUCN African Elephant Specialist Group has been working to update the status and range maps of Africa's elephants in 2 separate reports, one for the forest elephant and another for the savanna elephant. We expect to publish both reports by the end of 2025. With these data, we will reassess each species and their risk of extinction according to the IUCN Red List categories and criteria. The data compiled and carefully vetted by our experts in these 2 reports depends on the diligent collection in the field by range state government partners and collaborating non-governmental organizations. We thank all such partners, some of whom are in this room today, for their cooperation, collaboration, and hard work in this regard. However, there still remains some sites that have not been surveyed for more than 10 years, as highlighted in the document. We encourage cooperation between governments, IGOs, NGOs, and funding bodies to prioritize data collection at these sites. In terms of threats, poaching for ivory and habitat degradation remain the primary drivers of population decline of both elephant species. This includes a number of forest elephant populations recently recognized as extirpated. It also includes important forest elephant populations in transboundary areas in West Africa and the Albertine Rift region that are subject to increased risk due to broader security issues in these locations. We encourage cross-boundary elephant research and protection activities in these areas. Human-elephant conflict and any related retaliatory killing of elephants is also a threat requiring attention. And our specialist group is available to technically assist range states on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on UNEP.
Thank you, Madam Chair. United Nations Environment Programme appreciates this opportunity to share information on the implementation of the African Elephant Action Plan through the African Elephant Fund. The revised African Elephant Action Plan remains a comprehensive framework, bringing together the African elephant range stage in the conservation and management of this keystone species. The African Elephant Fund, established as one of the key financial mechanisms to support its implementation, has financed over 70 projects across more than 70% of the range states. Currently, the fund has launched its 11th call for project proposals with a submission deadline of 15th March 2025. The notice on the call and the details on the proposal requirements have been communicated to the range states through the CITES Management Authority focal points. The proposal documents are also accessible on the UNEP and African Elephant Fund websites. We encourage the range states to take this opportunity to secure funding for the African elephant conservation and management initiatives. We would like to thank the donors for their continued contributions to the African Elephant Fund, and we would also like to invite the new donors, all parties and stakeholders to contribute to the fund. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have one more observer organization. I will allow it and allow them to be brief. Oh, I now have the USA. So I turn to the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports the document recommendations as written. We understand the concerns of Singapore and Belgium. We support collecting all data. And we recommend a way for parties to more clearly identify whether the source of the trade route is verified with airway bills, shipping labels, for example, on the form. We recommend that Singapore's recommendation go to the Mike and Edith subgroup for consideration. Thank you.
We'll lastly call on WCS, and then I'll conclude where we are on this.
Thank you, Chair. I promise to be brief. We'd like to thank IUCN for its intervention. We closely collaborate with the IUCN specialists groups and, of course, parties in the field. We support the recommendations in paragraph 67, but we also welcome, and no one has commented on this, the proposed feasibility study of monitoring additional species as outlined in paragraph 61 and 62 of the document. And we encourage that paragraph 67E, which notes this, also prioritizes monitoring of key Appendix 1 taxa, such as pangolins and bird species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll consult with the Secretariat. I will probably need to, would like to hear further from, I've heard the suggestion from the U.S. that they would like basically recommendation C as amended by Singapore to go to the Mike Edith subgroup, but I don't know if you're suggesting that happen here in a working group. I anticipate that Mike and Edith, there will be a subgroup meeting to discuss some of the other documents. So if I take your suggestion correctly, you're suggesting that the amendment by Singapore be discussed in that, if I create that subgroup meeting. Okay, I've characterized that correctly. But I will look to what other standing committee members think of that suggestion. I now have Belgium, so I assume it's a reaction to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With Singapore's explanation on what their intention was, we can agree to this and would therefore ask this not to be deferred to the Mike Edith subgroup. I think the Mike Edith subgroup will already have many issues to discuss, so everything that can be agreed upon here seems a good way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. That's also my sense and my instructions. So I'm looking to see if any other standing committee members, I haven't heard any opposition to Singapore's amendment. Now Belgium is saying they can accept it with that clarification. So I look to the US if they can accept that. Call on the U.S. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. We would just like to clarify that if the Singapore's language is added as verified, if the data is non-verified, will that data still be collected?
Okay, the Secretariat is explaining to me what the Singapore's amendment would be. So the question on number 7 that EDIS collects, trade route information would now read, is verified information available for the seizure? Verified trade route is verified trade route known? You would check yes if that's true. You would check no if it's not verified. There would be a footnote to that question that basically would say verified trade route information should be supported by official documentation such as a bill of lading, shipping manifests, customs declaration forms, and cross-checked with controlled border authorities. So that's my understanding of how this amendment to that form would work. I see the U.S. is requesting the floor.
Thank you for that clarification, Chair. The United States would recommend the statement, "If yes, please indicate," be struck out if that is the case, so that if no is checked, the information is still provided.
Secretariat is saying if you say if no, there would be no information provided on the seizure. Because basically the way Singapore has now changed it is that you would basically be looking at that question as verified trade route information. It complicates things. I guess we're having some discussion of this, and maybe it is good that it goes to the CITES subgroup, although I understand the chair's concern. Because right now, the question reads, is trade route known? If yes, you answer the subsequent questions. If no, you don't. So perhaps additional question is, can you verify the trade route information and say, is that sort of a compromise? And you would say what information, you can say yes or no, it is verified, and support that information. So could we do it that way? And I asked Singapore if that way you're still getting reporting. If you can't verify the ITIS group can decide what to do with that information if it's not verified, but you would not be losing that information. Whereas if I put the verified where Singapore wants to put it, you would only report seizures that you can basically verify. And so there's a loss of information, as the U.S. has suggested. So I would say we leave the question as is and add a sub-question under it. Are you able to verify the trade information you are reporting, yes or no? And that would have the footnote that Singapore suggests. Is that a way forward? I'm seeing nodding heads from the Mike and EDIS subgroup chair, so I think I might have found a solution. Is that acceptable to Singapore? I look to the standing committee members if they can agree to that, because I'm reluctant to send this document. I know others will be going to the Mike EDIS subgroup. All right. Okay, so basically in conclusion, that the standing committee takes note of the downward pike. Do I have to repeat all of these or just? Maybe just say take note of it. Yeah, so basically what I've heard is that the standing committee would take note of A, B, D, E, and F in paragraph 67. And then when we come to C, the standing committee agrees to the changes to the EDIS data collection form as contained in Annex 1D to the present document as amended by the chair to include an additional question to parties to indicate if the trade route information is verified. Is that acceptable to the standing committee? And that would contain the footnote that explains how you answer the verified question. Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm going to conclude. We accept that conclusion on 65.1, and we will move on to 65.2. And again, I asked you to be very specific when we're talking about recommendations, but I turn to the Secretariat to introduce the document first.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes the progress made in implementing the priority recommendations from the review of the CITES program. Significant progress has been made in improving data governance, data validation, and online system functionality, while alternative modeling approaches have also been explored, including the application of network analysis methods to CITES data. To address the challenges with the data validation process, a draft protocol is proposed in Annex 2A of the document. The Secretariat also proposes new draft decisions in Annex 5, focusing on the implementation of the remaining high and medium priority recommendations of the CITES review. The Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 32 of the document. Thank you.
I invite Standing Committee members to speak to the recommendations contained in paragraph 32, in particular, the one that reviews and agrees on the protocol for CITES and the application of the network models. So I think A, B, and C are pretty easy to understand. It's probably I'm seeking for thoughts on D and E from the Standing Committee members. Excuse me, I should have called on traffic after the Secretariat, so I call on traffic.
Thank you, Chair. With permission, traffic would seek further clarification on the addition on the last agenda item, as it may have ramification on how we can use historical data and other operations of mechanism of data in CITES analysis. Therefore, if possible, to still consider those amendments with a subgroup, traffic would appreciate that. And if now I can start with my report on 65.2, I would appreciate that. So thank you, Chair, for inviting us to comment on 65.2. Traffic appreciates the opportunity to improve the CITES program by implementing the review recommendations. We thank the Mike CITES TAG and the Secretariat for their input to ensure the best data and methodology guide the CITES analysis and inform the parties. We look forward to receiving input from the parties on the proposed protocols of the CITES data validation in Annex 2A and to discussions with the Mike CITES subgroup on how to best resolve pending inquiries to ensure the best validated data informs the CITES analysis. Traffic is excited about the modeling developments to improve the statistical rigor of the trend analysis. We further welcome input from the parties on the proposed network analysis, which allows for representation of transnational illegal trade flows in raw and worked ivory, the identification of parties requiring attention under NIAP, and the exploration of emerging trends assessing linkages to CITES action in line with CITES program objectives. Thank you, Chair.
The Chair notes your concern with document 65.1, which I think we did conclude on, but I've been told by the Secretariat that your concern on that, on what we did, will be discussed in the further document where we talk about network analysis and others here. So I think we can leave 65.1 as we have, and I think what will happen is some of this will now go to the Mike group, but in relation to document 65.2. So I have Belgium wishing to speak to 65.2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We note the importance of the review of CITES and the recommendations that came out of that review process. We support the continuation of the implementation of the remaining outstanding recommendations. In the current set of draft decisions, certain recommendations are highlighted, but others are left out. We therefore propose to delete recommendations B, C, and F, and amend recommendation G by renewing the decisions 19.94 to 19.96 with some updated language, which has been submitted to the Secretariat. This way, none of the recommendations of the CITES review will be lost. We have one small side note on this matter. The recommendations as drafted by COP19 are subject to the availability of external funding. It was our understanding that this funding has been provided by donors, but perhaps there's still additional funding required. We presume the Secretariat can clarify this and the decisions can be adapted accordingly. So whether or not we should start them with subject to the availability of external funding. Regarding recommendation D on the protocol for data validation, we want to raise the issue on the need for justification when a party requests removal of data for the CITES analysis. We feel this justification is necessary to make sure no data is left out without a valid reason. This should be included in the protocol, so we cannot agree to the current version of Annex 2A. Finally, on recommendation E, on the network analysis model, we feel that this new method may be a useful one, and we request that this model be annexed to the CITES report to COP20, so that the COP can consider its usefulness compared to the current cluster analysis. We note that the cluster analysis will be the basis for making recommendations to the COP, as the cluster analysis is the currently accepted way of working. The COP can then consider both models and advise further. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I will see if the Secretariat can answer your question on funding, or someone from the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. It is my understanding that, yes, donor funding was received for the implementation of some of the recommendations. What Traffic has highlighted is that they do need the core funding to undertake some of the work, and so the estimates that were included in the annex to the review recommendations were inadequate, as it did not take into consideration the overall shortfall that Traffic has in terms of budget. So I hope that clarifies.
I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of Japan, as for the recommendation E concerning the network analysis in Annex 4, the Secretariat pointed out problems in paragraph 25 and concluded not supporting using the network analysis to guide the ETS report to consider that COP20 or to inform the ETS categorization of parties. However, despite with some bias adjustment, the analysis is consistent with the results of the previous cluster analysis and the NIAP classification, and also includes important indication that countries not covered in the cluster analysis in document 65.3 could play an important role in significantly reducing smuggling. We believe this result is important and should be included of the report to COP20. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now call on observer parties, and I have Benin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the document. The ETS information and the analysis are the reference points used by parties in the application of the law throughout the world to ensure that we bring an end to the international trafficking in ivory. It is essential that we maintain this information and that the data is used in the analysis. And we should also consider the importance of including data, and we think that parties should be able to verify the validity of the data. And the verification should be accompanied by a legitimate justification. That is why we support the protocol for the validation of data, and where there should set out clearly that parties must provide justification which is adequate to submit a request for information on data. We also encourage parties to take the necessary provisions to maintain the information on stocks and stockpiles in up to date by using the information. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports Belgium's recommendations. Thank you.
I have Singapore.
Madam Chair, we support the recommendations to enhance transparency in the CITES analysis by making the statistical methodology, underlying code, and supporting documentation publicly available to all parties. Regarding data validation, we support the proposed protocol outlined in Annex 2A of the document. Parties should be given the opportunity to validate their country's seizure data, either through CITES online or in response to a Secretariat notification. We also emphasize the importance of contextual information to ensure that the unique contexts and circumstances of each party are properly considered. This can be done in consultation with parties as required by Resolution COF 1010 to determine whether there is a need to include them in the National Ivory Action Plan. CITES analysis should not be used as a standalone tool to assess parties' effort against illegal ivory trade. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I will open the floor to observer organizations, and then I will consult with the Secretariat on a way forward. I have WWF.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would first remind the committee that WWF is a contributor to the cost of the CITES analysis. This is because we respect the rigour of the CITES methodology and the integrity of its findings. That said, we are open to proposals for changes in the operation of CITES, as long as they serve to improve its rigour rather than weaken it. In that regard, we have concerns around some recommendations in the document. We are particularly concerned about the view detailed in paragraph 15b that if a party formally expresses its concern regarding the validity of data from non-MA sources, these should be excluded without the need for further justification. The perceptions that could arise if this recommendation was accepted should not need to be spelled out. Regarding the network analysis, the detailed in paragraphs 19 to 15, we find this proposal interesting. Paragraph 24 in the report states that the MIC-ETIS tag noted the analysis provided added quantitative dimensions of the ETIS data and could be useful for parties. We do not therefore agree with the Secretariat that the network analysis should not be used because of assumptions inherent in the data. Such assumptions are inherent in any trade data set and would also apply to the annual illegal trade report. Chair, we strongly urge that in considering the recommendations in the report, the committee prioritise those that maintain or enhance the rigour of the CITES report and avoid changes that could weaken it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will pause here and seek some guidance. Okay, I'm looking for the Standing Committee's help in seeing if I understood the interventions correctly by that I've heard, particularly from Standing Committee members. And so I understood there was a suggestion by Belgium to delete recommendation B, C, and F, which the United States supported. And so B, C, and F would be deleted. And then I heard support on A, which is to note the progress made with the implementation of the priority recommendations of the CITES review, as well as the challenges identified. Do I have that part correct? And then recommendation D, what I heard was comments on that one and suggested changes. And so what it would now read is request the CITES subgroup to consider the data validation protocol as contained in Annex 2A, taking into consideration comments made in plenary by Standing Committee members and parties, Belgium, USA, Benin, and the concern raised by traffic earlier on to 65.1, relating to the verification of trade route information of historical data. So D would now read, request the CITES subgroup to consider the data validation protocol as contained in Annex 2A, taking into consideration comments made in plenary by Standing Committee members and parties, and the concern raised by traffic relating to the verification of trade route information of historical data and report back to SC, to the Standing Committee. I look for this Standing Committee members, if I've captured that correctly. I guess we're getting a question on when they would report back to the Standing...
Sorry, at the present meeting.
At the present meeting. So the CITES group would look at the network, would look at the data validation process here. And then E, basically the Standing Committee agrees that the network analysis be included as an annex to the CITES report for COP20, noting that the categorization of parties requiring attention in the NIAP process will be based on the cluster analysis. But the other new exploratory analysis will be presented in the report to the COP for the parties' consideration there. And then G would read, we agree to renew the decisions 19.94 to 19.96 on the implementation of the priority recommendations from the review of the CITES program to COP20. So that's where I have things going right now. Have I captured it correctly? Looking to the Standing Committee in particular, I see the CITES subgroup chair agreeing, so I think she knows what work she needs to do here on that one. The data validation process. Okay, and then with that, I will conclude 65.2. One thing I did forget, and that went with 65.1 in terms of, just so we note it in the longer record, was to congratulate Equatorial Guinea for submitting their first ever data report. That was historic. So I would like to get that in the longer summary record for this meeting. Doesn't require any action. And now I will move on to document 65.3, which is the CITES categorization of parties, and I call on the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the recommendations from the CITES Technical Advisory Group and clarification from traffic regarding key data elements, the Secretariat proposed in the document draft criteria for the categorization of parties in the CITES report to the Conference of Parties. The measure of scale of trade based on seizure in and seizure out bias adjusted variables and illegal ivory trade links and measure of law enforcement effort are proposed as the criteria. contextual information used by traffic, and the process the Secretariat follows in the context of Step 1 of the National Ivory Action Plan process are also discussed. The Standing Committee is invited to review and agree the draft criteria for the categorization of parties, the contextual information used by traffic, and the process used by the Secretariat to engage parties identified in ITES reports under the NIAP process. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I would ask, it's 10 to 5, I would maybe ask the translators to possibly give us an extra 10 minutes because I want to hear what the discussion is on 65.3. I have a feeling some of it will be going to the Mike Edis subgroup, but I'm hoping that maybe we can have that discussion and maybe conclude this agenda item.
Yes, Chair, that's fine. Yes, Chair, no problem.
For the translators' patience. So I open up to the Standing Committee the recommendations for 65.3. Have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The draft criteria as drafted in paragraph 9A and B seem to provide for a more robust manner in which parties can be identified for the NIA process. But there remain certain questions. As indicated in the text, there are thresholds that are not specified. We also note that the bias adjustment variables are no longer mentioned, and for the contextual information, it is somewhat unclear if under the current wording, they would still be used in the same manner. For both elements, we consider it important that they remain included and used in the ITES analysis and in the categorization of parties. It would be interesting to have more insights in the views of the Mike ITES tag and traffic on these matters. On recommendation B, as already explained, the contextual information is important to put numbers into context and, for example, allow for differentiation when two parties have similar illegal trade volumes. We are of the view that this contextual information is important and should be maintained in the analysis and remains part of the categorization of parties. For recommendation C, the added value of the process described in paragraph 13 is somewhat unclear. These issues seem to be already mainly covered by step 1B and C of the NIA process. For example, in step A, it's mentioned, step A of the document, it is mentioned that the Secretariat will prepare a compilation of the information in the ITES report. But the information related to each party that has been identified through the ITES analysis is already there in the report. So we do not quite see the need for the compilation as it's already presented. Step C of the Secretariat's proposed additional process, which talks about engagement with other experts and potential country missions, is also already covered by the existing language in the guidelines to the NIA process. So we are not convinced that an additional process is needed. We have no comments on the other recommendations so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I open the floor to any other Standing Committee members. I've got the UK.
Thank you, Chair. UK agrees with the comments and observations of Belgium. Thank you.
Any observer parties wishing to take the floor? Okay, I see traffic wishing to speak. I will jump out of sequence and allow traffic because perhaps I should have called on them earlier. So I will call on traffic, but ask you to respect the 2 minutes, and then I'll return to parties.
Thank you, Chair. And forgive me, Chair. I thought you said observer parties, but observer organization. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to review the methodology of the identification of parties requiring attention under NIAP as implemented in the ITES report to the parties since COP12. We support the intervention on the floor and look forward for discussion with the Mike ITES subgroup to seek guidance on how to interpret the proposed criteria in the next analysis to COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Then I have the UAE.
Thank you, Chair. The UAE acknowledges the critical role of CITES in combating illegal trade in elephant and specimen and support efforts to enhance its transparency and consistency and effectiveness. We recognize the importance of developing clear, objective, and science-based criteria to enhance fair and accurate categorization of parties involving in the illegal ivory trade. However, we emphasize the need of a robust and equitable assessment framework that reflects each country's actual roles in the trade chain. In this regard, it's crucial to differentiate between the transit source and destination countries and the countries with no direct involvement in this trade. We argue that parties' categorizations reflect such distinctions to prevent unjust inclusion of countries that does not contribute to this problem. Furthermore, we stress the importance of recognizing the national enforcement measures, legislative frameworks, and proactive efforts undertaken by parties to contribute to combat wildlife crime. A country's commitment to CITES compliance and law enforcement action should be fundamental considerations in any categorization process. We remain committed to working with the Secretariat, MIC, CITES, TAG, and Traffic, and all parties to ensure that categorization criteria are applied fairly and consistently, reinforcing global efforts to combat illegal wildlife trade while maintaining the credibility of the CITES framework. Thank you.
I call on Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As for the recommendation B, we support the Secretariat's view in the paragraph 11 that the contextual information should remain contextual information and should not be considered as criteria to inform the categorization of parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have Singapore yet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll keep it brief. We are aligned with the sentiments that UAE colleagues expressed earlier on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I will now basically, there are any observer organizations yet? I ask you to be brief and speak to what's before us, and then I'll consult with the Secretariat as to where we are ending up here. I don't see any requests from observer organizations, so let me consult with the Secretariat here. Thank you. It's the end of the day and I'm getting tired, so I may need some clarification by Belgium if I've gotten this correctly. A would be changed to, this is what the Standing Committee basically is invited to request the MIC CITES subgroup to consider the comments made by Standing Committee members and parties in the plenary relating to the draft criteria in paragraph 9A and B of document SC 78, document 65.3, and make recommendations relating for consideration by the Standing Committee at the present meeting. Did I capture that correctly? I know that was supported by the UK, Belgium, so I'm looking to you. Guidance. I see Belgium agreeing with that, so can the Standing Committee agree with that change to recommendation A? Again, I'll read it. Standing Committee requests the Mike Edis subgroup to consider the comments made by the Standing Committee members and parties in the plenary relating to the draft criteria and paragraph 9A and B of document SC 78, document 65.3, the one we're discussing, and make recommendations for consideration by the Standing Committee at the present meeting. So that will go to the Mike Edis subgroup. And then I have on recommendation B, what I think was agreed to. The Standing Committee agrees the contextual information in paragraph 10 of the present document used by traffic to inform the categorization of the parties. So the Standing Committee agrees to the contextual information in paragraph 10. And then I heard from Singapore and UAE that, and perhaps some of the Standing Committee members, that paragraph C would be deleted. That recommendation would be deleted. So I look to the Standing Committee members to see if I've got this correctly, because I am tired at this point. I have Belgium and then Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to prolong the discussion, but it's not entirely clear the way recommendation B is worded now. It says that the contextual information is used to inform the categorization of parties, and we want to make sure that this means that it is part of the process used to put parties into different categories and not just cite information that is out there. So we want to have it clear that the contextual information is part of the categorization process of parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I'll turn to the Secretariat, but they're telling me that that is clear, that the way it reads, agree the contextual information in paragraph 10 of the present document used by traffic to inform the categorization of parties. Now I also have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just let me confirm that the Secretariat's view on the paragraph 11 is consistent with the recommendation B.
I will consult with the Secretariat and get that clarified. Thank you, Japan, for asking for that clarification. We had much discussion on how to phrase this in the best English. Maybe I'm not even a native English speaker. I spoke German before I learned English. So anyway, paragraph B would now read, agree that the contextual information in paragraph 10 of the present document can be used by traffic as part of the categorization process. I see Japan nodding. Is the CITES subgroup chair, Belgium, acceptable? Yes, okay. So Standing Committee agrees that the contextual information in paragraph 10 of the present document can be used by traffic as part of the categorization process. I have Belgium.
Apologies, it's getting late indeed. In your suggestion, it's worded that it can be used. I would suggest to simply say be used by traffic as part of the categorization of parties. Otherwise, it may seem as optional. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I will read it again with Belgium's suggestion, and I'm cognizant if we're tired, the translators are even more tired, so otherwise we'll have to continue in the morning on this, but I'll take one more attempt. B would read, agree that the contextual information in paragraph 10 of the present document be used by traffic as part of the categorization process. I'm seeing thumbs up and nodding heads, so we have agreement, and we've concluded this document, and we will start tomorrow with document 65.4, domestic ivory markets, and I thank the interpreters for their grace period of giving us some extra time to finish. Thank you all, and have a good evening, and get some rest for tomorrow. I have housekeeping announcements from the Secretariat because there are working groups and drafting groups meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Just some announcements. Today, as soon as this session is over, you have the drafting group on access to funding in room 12. There's a closed meeting on MIC Asia countries in room 11. Tomorrow, during lunchtime, so 12:15 to 13:45 tomorrow, we have the working group on the application of Article 13 in the Lao People's Democratic Republic. This will take place in room number 9. That's tomorrow lunchtime, Article 13 in Lao PDR, room 9. There are also some regional meetings during the morning hours, tomorrow from 8 to 9 a.m., regional meeting for Central and South America and the Caribbean region in room 2, which is level -1. Also from 8 to 9 a.m., regional meeting for Asia in room 3, which is level -1. And lastly, tomorrow from 12:45 to 13:45 during the lunch hours tomorrow, there's a drafting group on agenda item 33.1, Oceanic white-tip shark, which will take place in room number 15, which is in level 3. Thank you, Chair.
And with that, have a good evening. No.